You're listening to the Zetetic newscast on the Zetetic News Network with your hosts, Dave, and Xavier Diamant. Proceed by inquiry.
All right, welcome to episode 44 of the Zetetic newscast. We are your hosts, Dave, myself, and Xavier Diamant. It is November 16th, 2023, and this is what we're calling our Thanksgiving Apocalypto. And we've got so much to discuss. We haven't had a show in about a month, which is kind of par for the course. We're the first next generation network powered by Theta, and that's a decentralized streaming infrastructure cryptocurrency project that we think might be able to enable us to, survive into the future outside of the grasp of the censors. Although, as time has gone on, that's always open for debate. But it also ties into one of the focus areas that we often discuss and will discuss tonight, and that's the innovations in the crypto space and what that means for the financial system and the broader, economic situation. We also are going to talk about, the major pivotal events that have happened since our last discussion and going into the end of the year. If you'd like to weigh in on any of our discussions, if you have questions or want to bring something up and get our thoughts, or just bring something to everyone's attention, this is a call-in show. The number to call in is 1-855-877-5112. If we get enough callers in the queue, we will award the fourth caller 444 Tfuel, which is part of the Theta Network project. It's sort of like a software credit access to the decentralized network that they're trying to establish. It's also a way for us to incentivize participants in the show. And in the future, maybe, we'll be self-serving our content, over this decentralized web, and everybody who's serving it up or engaging with it will be in some way compensated with cryptocurrency. That's the idea anyways. But like everything going on in this country with Daddy Gov and the regulators and the well-moneyed financial interests, which seemingly control everything, it's sort of a big TBD in my view. Xavier, how you been, man? Like, what's on the top of your mind for today's show?
Well, just trying to parse all of the developments of recent, the heightened geopolitical tensions, the saber rattling, and the sort of cloud of calamity, but also opportunity that continues to rain down upon this realm.
Yeah, one of the things that broke today, which ties into this whole conflagration in Israel and Palestine since we last talked, was the Osama bin Laden letter to America. And this, I think it broke this morning, that The Guardian, who had this letter written by purportedly Osama bin Laden, I mean, we really don't know where it came from, since 2002. And then I guess people started reading it or circulating it on TikTok, and they took it down. And, now it's like very difficult to actually find the text, of course, because the first thing you're going to do is go to the search engine and try to search it. And it's not just The Guardian who tried to wipe it, but like of course, the search engines aren't going to serve that up to you on a silver platter. You really have to go digging for it. And I just found it hilarious that this is supposed to be a news organization. And you have, why did they bring it down? Well, I think the stated reason was because people were reading it out of context. And I'm like, what context are you talking about?
Right.
Because they're reading it in the context of 2023, like 20 years plus after it was written, and they weren't born yesterday. They've seen
20 years
of what was
referred to in the original.
Yeah. And
out of context.
Kind of like the I do see kind of like a turn in the public sentiment around this subject, because it's like the big SJW thing to like support Palestine, right? Yeah. And that's, I guess, traditionally been just sort of off limits in American discourse. But now that's being more popularized, I see, more accepted, and
more demographics and more people, different political persuasions are starting to realize the elephant in the room maybe a little bit better.
Yeah.
After all this time trying to sweep it under the rug, you know.
And then we've also had all this like foundational precursor to this conflagration in the form of Ye's comments and all the, you know, Adam Green and Alex Jones, like in the alt media, Ben Shapiro, you know, Jordan Peterson, all of this has been brewing, exactly. That's a perfect term for it. And it's all coming to a head, like people having revelations reading Osama bin Laden's letter to America. And I just find it almost reminiscent of where we're at with Cerveza virus.
Sure.
It's just that the time scale is different.
Perception management around a taboo that it renders anyone who dare mention it persona non grata, pariah extraordinaire. But it's, you know, it's becoming, again, too obvious. It's like trying to sweep an elephant in the room under the rug. You can only drape it so much, you know. But, you know, they're going to continue to try. And it's the same thing with, you know, the Cerveza putsch. I mean, it's all out there in plain view. I mean, in a lot of ways, it kind of harkens to the H.G. Wells, George Bernard Shaw kind of Fabian socialist model of a open conspiracy, where it's just paraded around. And people have been so paralyzed and anesthetized and dumbed down that they don't understand all of the resistance points along the way, and it just kind of gets rolled into day-to-day life in an incremental, but then occasionally accelerating fashion.
You think about the Overton window and how it's been moved since 9/11. You know, in many ways, and Cerveza virus is almost like a 9/11 2.0, and you see the coordination of media and propaganda.
Absolutely,
there's so many similarities between how they got behind the war on terror and how they got behind the war on Cerveza virus.
Right,
and it's very much the same playbook. But what I'm pointing out is like the time scale where the propaganda works is shortening.
Yeah, but it's almost like their desired effect is dampening to an extent. So it's almost like they have to keep doubling and tripling down and escalating things into a like a cauldron of malicious possibilities, you know.
But think of how they want to control. They can't even let their audience read something they published, which someone wrote, regardless of who they are, what they did. Like, why can't the public read this? Oh, it's out of context. Well, who, according to who? Like, to you? Again, what context are you talking about exactly?
And like, oh well, this comes from a bias.
So the Guardian. My question
Right.
to you, and I think at this point,
Whenever they say context, they mean you don't have the right bias.
well, this is my question to the Guardian. I know you see Zetetic.news is probably a joke organization, but I think at this point you've demonstrated that we're more of a news organization than you are, even though we have 11,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is nothing compared to your funding and viewership. But my question is, if it lacked context, are you going to re-release it with the context? Like, are you going to put some sort of disclaimer or caveat or ADL statement, to preface what? And again, if you actually find the text, and we could post a link in the Telegram, or someone already did.
Yeah.
It's all this gesticulation around the historical situation of the existence of Israel and Palestine.
Right.
And of course, the Guardian wants to have us believe that it's anti-Semitic, but Osama in there talks to that specific issue and basically preempts them,
Right.
accusing him of anti-Semitism, basically saying this is not anti-Semitic. Can there be a delineation between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, because they try to conflate them?
Oh, that is their
such
number
that
one playbook.
that
Absolutely.
to conflate them so that if you so much as question anything about the creation, existence, or administration of the state of Israel,
or ongoing motives.
You hate Jews.
Which is absurd.
It's so obtuse.
Well, and also the thing is, there's such a sinister implication in there, and that is that and this is sort of not intended by this ad hominem that they're basically trying to tar and feather anyone who brings this up by accusing the criticisms that are typically directed towards the issue, which is the treatment and the land grabs and the settlements and the historical breadth and depth of occupational violence and conflict. The implication is that, if that is indeed, like just take their argument and reach it to its logical conclusion and say, okay, well, if it really is the case that this form of criticism is anti-Semitic, what you're basically saying is that Jews have the right to perpetuate all these forms of violence that need to be exempt from criticism, essentially. And that's not even what the people advancing the critical argument want.
Right.
And it's this kind of Moat and Bailey fallacy where they put up a moat, which is, Jews have a right to exist, basically. But then the implication is, if you're critical of this governmental state and the history therein and all the biblical trappings around it, then you must not want this people to exist or something. And it's like, it's a Moat and Bailey fallacy. They're protecting a much more contentious position, which is
a form of putting words in your mouth.
Yeah, it's a contentious position to say that, basically, we're entitled to do this because of our beliefs, right?
Right.
I mean, and that's worthy of contempt by just about anyone. But if they dress it up as this thing of like, we're just trying to defend ourselves and we just want to exist. Then
right.
It's this Kafka trap that they set up.
I actually witnessed firsthand that psychology manifest. I connected with this woman on LinkedIn. She's based in Israel, and LinkedIn is a professional social media network, but it's increasingly, a self-stroking Facebook.
Of course.
And sometimes I'm just astonished at the stuff that people will expose about themselves to their professional counterparts and peers and whatnot. And she made this post about she was complaining about the media's treatment of the coverage of the conflict, citing the at the time there were a lot of chyrons showing 10,000 dead Palestinians,
right.
blah blah blah, and she was complaining that this was painting Israel in a bad light and pointing
to say nothing of the action,
pointing back to, well, hey, a lot more Germans died in World War II, but they were still the bad guys, and yeah, we killed more Japanese in World War II, but they were still the bad guys. Why they're the bad guys and we killed 10,000? Like, why are we not getting the kind of treatment that she feels is deserved? And I'm sitting there like, what is, so Hamas killed what, 1,400 reportedly, 1,000, and then it's like, how many innocent people do you get to kill before you do become the bad guy? That's like what I'm sitting there wondering, because isn't a just war supposed to be like a proportionate response? If there even is such a thing as a just war, like, it's a proportional response. So, and I'm not saying it should be eye for an eye and you should go kill 1,400 random people, but like, they're supposed to be targeting Hamas. But that doesn't seem to be like what's happening. Like, out of the 10,000, how many were identified? What evidence did you have that they were planning a violent? You know what I mean? It's just like all of that is lost in the fog of war.
Well, yeah, and then painting it as, this is our 9/11. That
right.
should be a huge red flag, smoking gun,
right.
Smoke signal.
And that's another thing Osama bin Laden mentioned is, because of the top-down hegemonic control of the U.S. military and its partners in government, the blockading of Iraq and preventing of aid and whatnot is reported to have led to the deaths of 1.5 million children. And they're like, we kill 3,000 and the whole world stands up and they haven't sat down yet. And they're supporting, your basic invasion of a country that had nothing to do with it. When prior to that, you killed 1.5 million children.
Right.
Through your blockades and what do they call them, sanctions and whatnot. And it's like, it's a valid point.
Absolutely.
If we believe in America, the right to self-defense, right? Do we not extend that to the international community? It's like, we're the only ones who are allowed to defend ourselves. Everybody else they're terrorists.
Exactly. It's the double standard of
huge double standard.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Our violence is always defense.
Right.
Your violence is always terrorism.
The other thing that I think I haven't listened to like a huge number of these TikTokers who read this and then they're like selfie videoing them, talking about how it made them feel. But I'm hopeful that one of the parts in his what would you call that? A declaration or whatever, his letter to America, talks about like the killing of civilians and how they're characterized as innocents in this whole thing. That like, if there's a beef between anybody, it's between us and the U.S. government. But he points out that the U.S. government is a function of the people of America, and they elected that government, which is attacking us, and they also they fund it through taxes. And again, that should be a point of reflection people are making when they volunteer their energy in the form of, let's be honest, it's like 50% a year if you're a wage earner, that when you add up the Social Security, the Medicare, the state, the local, the income, the sales, the gas, the inspection, the property, registrations, business licenses, insurance. You add it all up. I might even be conservative with 50%.
At this juncture, with the inflation rate that's suppressed,
That's a hidden tax.
right? It's another hidden tax.
That goes to the central bank that like owns the government, basically.
Yeah.
So anyways, it was really interesting this whole development with the Guardian trying to. I mean, what are they thinking? Like such a FUBAR like marketing move too, because this is not the attention that they want. Like, don't you realize taking it down only makes people more interested to see what was said?
Number one, and two, it's further confirmation that the media institutions themselves aren't trustworthy.
Are bought off.
Yeah, they're complete conflict. of
Making
interest
Osama bin
propaganda
Laden's
mills.
point.
Absolutely. So the very fact that they censor it is confirmation
Yeah.
of the allegations in the document. It's like they're proving his point.
I know,
for him.
it's-
and I mean, part of it is maybe part of this whole just shock and awe open conspiracy stuff. Like they just can come out.
I think they're definitely at that point.
and just flagrantly show how paternalistic and misanthropic and domineering
And
they are, right?
intentionally nonsensical.
Absolutely.
I think that's part of the whole gaslighting
Yep.
thing.
And
The trauma. It's like a form of trauma-based mind control.
100% it's intergenerational. And you think MK Ultra stopped when they said that the funding was up and they weren't doing anything along those lines anymore? I mean, give me a break.
Right.
It's just it's exponentiated, and it's been
No, I think that whatever they learned in that project, they encapsulated those learnings, and they just didn't call it the same thing anymore. It evolved to a new project using those findings,
Project
basically.
Monarch and what have you. Yeah.
Projects were probably not to think that we're even told them all.
Oh God, we probably.
Are you kidding me?
It's like a scintilla, right? Yeah. So what they disclose is stuff that they deem, they believe with their hubris that they're already ahead of the curve of it. So it doesn't
Right.
matter
That
if
was-
the information is out there.
That was one of my big kind of awakening moments, is when I started to ponder the whole UFO issue, and it was at a very elementary level. I'm like, okay, so there's an agency of the government that collects reports, and they classify some and they don't classify others, and they're very wishy-washy on what that is going on here. And then you have these people wanting the government to sort of disclose it all. And of course I get that, like, okay, you have the documents, like share the documents, expose it. But like, I started to ponder, if we ever did get any kind of disclosure, not just of UFO, but like any subject, if it's coming from the government and not like, a whistleblower per se, which might also still have its its obfuscations, why would I trust what the government discloses about this subject area that I'm interested in? If they've been lying to me all this time, what has to happen between now and then to where I would actually even trust what they say? And so that was like early on in my like seeking the truth, and I was just like, man,
Right.
this is a harder nut to crack than like, I'm gonna go lobby my congressman and get them to force the CIA or the FBI or any number of like space black ops.
Right.
The congressmen aren't even let in on these types of information.
Right. The so-called like security clearances and stuff, like
The whole hierarchy of that is
90% of that pyramid is just like pin pushers, basically.
yeah.
It's just there to create this compartmentalization legitimation effect, where the people who are compartmentalized to do their respective things, they have no purview of the broader functioning of the
People need to
organization,
realize
right?
the real action is not in the government. It's in the corporations, because the government
They're basically one and the same.
government is just administration.
Right.
Okay, it's pin pushers, like you said.
It's
If they have a project, they go to a company.
Right.
So the real like secrets and nefarious things that are being planned and carried out are done by companies.
And with black budgets in facilities that are undisclosed, probably. Too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's the whole. You get some little hints of that in films like Avatar, that Earth just becomes this giant Borg corporation that goes around and just pillages resources here, there, and the other place. And of course, it's in the absurdist, chasm and ball, paradigm. But the reality is that kind of is what our realm is dominated by, is a sort of corporate Borg that is all pervasive and oligarchical in its structure, and that the governments are essentially the leg breakers. They're the henchmen. They're the bureaucracy and the enforcement arm of the mafioso Fugazi superstructure that underpins all of this corporate Borg. And that's really kind of a good segue into technology as it's been rolled out. I was having this conversation with my wife earlier today, and that they've had huge technological advancements in transportation and construction and architecture, but they've only allowed certain aspects of that hyperbolic growth and advancement to be rolled out so that they can control it ahead of time. So communications has been the kind of main focal point of a lot of the technological growth. But simultaneously, they've suppressed the benefit of these other innovations in these other essential fields. So the analogy I used is like when it comes to architecture and, for example, mass production of habitats, homes, super affordable housing, like deflationary cost kind of housing. They've had the capabilities for decades. They've shown they can 3D print plumb, wire, window, a 1,500 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, three-bedroom house with exterior modernization aesthetics and features for under $30,000 in a fraction of the time.
Meanwhile, I saw on Nextdoor, which is a local like neighborhood social media app, a reference to a local listing here in North Carolina where someone in city limits was asking $1,800 a month for someone to lease their 1950s style pull behind camper that was sitting in their yard.
Yeah.
$1,800 a month.
Right.
And this is not San Francisco or, like one of these huge cities. It's a pretty small metropolitan area. I think we have less than 1 million residents in the city I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And of course, everybody's like, oh, who would pay that? Blah, blah, blah. I wouldn't be surprised if someone did pay it.
At this juncture, it's pretty wild, because these the mortgage market is basically dead.
What was this? What was this camper? When was it paid off?
Right.
What did it cost? I mean, in 1950.
Oh God.
With inflation, even it probably cost like $5,000 to buy.
Right. Right.
And you're at $5,000 like 2.5 months in, basically.
Right. Exactly.
But
see, this is what they want the 15-minute cities to be. This is why BlackRock is buying up whole neighborhoods and whole townships. Yeah. This is what they want, is a hyper austerity rental economy. Yeah.
But you'll have the best like screen technology and streaming and VR and AR
and these awesome
that will allow you to escape the coffin true physical existence that you have.
And who knows, you may just be able to check out into this virtual realm and earn all of your credits that you're again then just going to dole through the door to keep your pod. that's the kind of Ready Player One gestalt there. But yeah, that's what's so fascinating about it is also just like the social like upheaval and like unrest that results from further and further disparities within the economy around basic needs and services. So it's almost like they're playing a very dangerous game, which is trying to sort of basically appease the legacy holders of the real estate market as it is, while kind of simultaneously allowing this sense of like almost disenfranchisement to brew amongst the population, almost as a precursor to some further exploit that they want to mobilize. And we've talked about the squatter nation possibility, where what happens basically in a hyper mobilized AI generative future, where what are all these people going to do? We basically, this is the whole like Yuval Harari line of transhumanism, which is, well, if we have all these advancements that outmode human labor and human input in growth and wealth generation, then how are we going to appease the loss of basically human labor in the future? And his whole solution is, drugs and video games. And I'm just kind of like, that's supposed to be like this kind of secular humanist technocrat solution.
It's literally it's literally like he just watched Idiocracy and took a note.
Wall-E,
right? Yeah.
And it's kind of like, okay, that's supposed to be humane, but at the same time, whatever did we do with all these top-down technotronic surveillification super state devices and innovations? Where are the other innovations?
Right. That's
where
what
are
I
the
was,
other ones, right?
That's what I was getting to, is like we're gonna see our ability to watch a screen evolve tremendously in its accessibility, and but that's like the one thing. That's like actually one of the only areas of the economic scenario where quality has gone up and cost has come down.
Right.
Because you can get these ridiculous flat screen TVs for $300 or $400. I mean, I have several. We're looking at a couple of them right now.
Right.
Which that screen you're looking at right now would have been beyond top of the line of what was available like 20 years ago. And what was available 20 years ago, only a very select few could afford. It was $20,000+ for something that big with far less fidelity, is what I'm getting to.
And still thicker, right?
Right, and still thicker. And
heavier.
And this is actually a good segue to, well, two things I want to mention in response to what you're saying. Number one, the real estate situation. One thing that did happen since our last show is WeWork declared bankruptcy, which was predictable.
Right.
But it just shows, the momentum of the Cerveza virus economy is kaput. Like there were sectors, despite all this like hemorrhaging in like the services sector, other sectors benefited. Think about the medical complex and how they've been able to
hoard labor, right?
Yeah. The tech sector, there was a lot of digitalization that happened with brick and mortar businesses that wouldn't have otherwise happened necessarily, because people were still conditioned and accustomed to going out in public and like frequenting these places. But that's not allowed now, so we have to like digitalize. And it was like this fabricated reason to acclimate everybody to this digital existence. And of course, commercial real estate is going to suffer in that. And WeWork was just like an opportunistic intermediary between the let's just say 2019 and before era, where office work and office life was normal and commonplace, and after that, where Zoom meetings and working remote and working from home,
Right.
in the industries where that was like permissible and normalized, is commonplace. So WeWork was in between that, where, hey, you want to save money by breaking your lease and just renting this one unit of many for your remote employees to meet there if you want.
Right.
Like, that was like the intermediary step to Squatter Nation, which we've talked about before, which is a straight up like that, the whole commercial real estate market, these big, and I have a personal example.
How many hundreds of millions of square foot of property?
I visited a property, a company in North Carolina recently. It's a financial services company, and I arrived there. It's one of these, multiplex office complexes. So there were other businesses there as well, but it was huge. And when I got into the specific company I was visiting, it was glistening glass, modern design, breakout rooms, a kitchen, a front desk. Like, it was a very nice office. There was nobody there.
Uh-huh.
And I'm thinking to myself, like, if I'm an executive and I walk through here and I see nobody in here, what am I paying this lease for?
Right.
So that's gonna continue. It's gonna accelerate. Despite some of these companies are like, we want you back in the office. Like, there's this whole war going on.
It's part of the labor hoarding stuff that's going on. And it's like, it's all this weird, again, I think, confusion by design, chaos, order out of chaos type psychological ops that are going on with different policies, right? You've got the Fed, like, trying to supposedly pump the brakes on inflation, which is a joke. They generated the problem, and now they're trying to slay the dragon that they hatched. So they're posturing that way. Meanwhile, government spending is at, like, the rate of $5 trillion a year at the current pace it's at since they obliterated whatever debt ceiling. So it's showing more and more that it is a giant fugazi. I mean, the average person looking at this is like, wait, so they really don't have it all figured out. I thought, they were saying inflation is transitory, and now they're saying they're winning inflation, but I'm spending more and more continuously at the grocery store for repairs and services.
Right.
It's like, wait. And if I actually measure it since 2019, some stuff is up 100%.
Yeah. Right.
So that's 30% a year.
I started to pay attention to, learning what the Fed was, where it came from in 2008. And I kind of got up to speed pretty quick. The situation of 2008, the subprime mortgage crisis and the financial crisis, kind of nudged me along to do that kind of brain work. But I have never since then stopped being amazed at their ability to continue to kick the can.
There's a term for it. It's one is numeromancy, right? So they're using numbers in this tricksy, deceptive, cloaked fashion to guide along basically a fugazi, a massive mafioso type Ponzi that's based on this extraordinary privilege of the world reserve currency status, but it's not based on anything. They can just print whatever they deem, according to their actuaries that they make up, what the price of money is. And it's they've already proven themselves, like, ever since their inception, they've done nothing but completely debase the currency and outsource all the industry.
But, like, this is amidst 2008. Okay, I was 21 at the time in 2008, and totally green as far as, like, being a worker in America.
Right.
And I can't help but want to know what this entity is all about and what it's doing. And I became astonished then that they do what you're saying, set the price of money, and that impacts the entire business cycle for every economy. And I was alarmed then, and I've been alarmed all the way to right now at the total ignorance of the public. I mean, obviously people are wising up to it and have wisened up relative to then, but like relative to what I would have thought, I would have thought it would have been like a household conversation by now in almost every household. But it's like when they have a federal board, reserve board meeting where they make a decision, I'm like disgusted that not just the general public, but like the financial media,
It's a religion.
they just sit around and wait for them to make their announcement, and of course then they plan accordingly, and it's just, it reeks of total resignation to, this is how it is, this is how it's been, this is how it's always going to be. And I hate that sentiment, because I see that with respect to the IRS, like the generational like conditioning to, this is how it's been, this is, you have no power,
Right.
you cannot, don't resist, don't even care, it just is what it is, and you have to make a better can you make a better decision? You obviously have to adapt to the present conditions, no doubt about that. Can we do both? Can we adapt to the present conditions and be outraged and like talk about it more openly, and consume media that talks about it more openly and make fun of, mock, I mean, whatever you have to do in your sphere of influence. Everybody has a different sphere of influence.
Right.
Talking about it with your family at a minimum, if that's all you can do, that's all you can do. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean they've it's almost
it's
like
alarming.
They've created the economy as a giant pyre that they're getting ready to light on fire as a sacrifice. There's this ritualistic vibe since Cerveza.
Like a Bohemian Grove type.
Yes, that there's with the mask and the ritual offering of the bodies worldwide, and then now this kind of setting in of economic sort of paralysis in multiple markets and uncertainty in geopolitics. It seems to entirely apocalyptically scripted.
This is another thing I meant to mention earlier, how the propaganda life cycle is, in my opinion, shortening. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean we're winning.
No, it just means they're really ready to embrace more volatility. Exactly,
because they are scientists, essentially.
Social engineers.
And it would be underestimating their intelligence to be like, oh, they're foobarring this. And
it's just incompetence. They don't know.
No. Like I think the more important takeaway is they know that people's fuse is getting shorter and shorter. This whole TikTok thing with Osama bin Laden, but like the fact that they took it down is underscoring what you just said, and that's that they don't care that the life cycle is shortening, because they still get to move the Overton window in the direction that they want. Like, okay, you people are now awake, whatever, you're still a minority, we're just gonna keep moving,
right?
We're just gonna keep moving.
And that's the open conspiracy side.
Yes,
of it,
exactly,
right?
Exactly.
Which is, where the grand chessboard has been set, and we're in the heat of the mid game, in my opinion. If you're using a chess analogy, I don't think we're in the near the end game per se, but it's nearing the end game. And the end game, of course, for them is just mass, depopulation and prison and war economies, and organized, medicalized mass euthanasia and eugenics campaigns, as, the only economic drivers of the remaining population of the world.
Okay, as you're talking about this, I'm playing in the background. If you're just listening, this is on Zetetic News YouTube. We're live streaming. We have a video component as well, but I've got the Ready Player One trailer playing in the background. I'm not going to use the audio because they have advanced algorithms to basically censor us now, copyrighted material. Maybe they're even looking at the images. But as the scene is opening, you see the protagonist walking through his neighborhood, and his neighborhood is a bunch of 1950s trailers. What did we talk about earlier? In our area, someone's renting a 1950s era trailer for $1,800 a month, and in this movie, which came out when 2020, it's a bunch of 1950s trailers sitting on I-beams and scaffolding, basically. Super tight quarters, less than a 15-minute city.
Right.
But it's basically squalor. And then he's in his coffin apartment.
He's in the laundry room of that trailer, and that's his.
That's where he sleeps.
Yeah.
And he puts on this advanced. And look, that's the most advanced thing in this society.
Right.
Is this headset that he wears.
Right.
And so I think we've referenced this multiple times in the past shows as a revelation of the method type Hollywood movie magic depiction of where they want to take us, basically where they are taking us, because that was one of the other clips I wanted to play for our viewers tonight, and that this happened in the last month since our last show. Lex Friedman had Mark Zuckerberg on his show to showcase his vision of the metaverse, or at least metaverse 1.0 or 0.01, whichever.
The beta version.
The beta version.
Yeah.
So I'm going to play, I think the first 5 minutes or so are really revealing, not just of the type of, I don't know what you want to call Lex Friedman in this context, but
the guinea pig.
The suck-up.
Sycophant guinea pig.
Sycophant, yeah, that was the other one that came to mind. But it's very revealing as to where they're taking it. And this also has a tie-in with Theta, because Theta, like any good corporate startup, is trying to read the technology trends and build in the direction of the trends so that they can garner corporate support.
Right. And
they have patents on streaming technology to facilitate this streaming 2.0 type experience, where we're not just streaming high resolution images on a flat screen anymore. We're going to have 360 degree viewing angles, and the current infrastructure, this is Theta's hypothesis basically, is not going to accommodate where we know from our insider knowledge these tech companies want to take us. Right. And what we see here with Lex and Zuck speaks to that, because this is where, the post-Cerveza world, where remote existence is the norm, there's a huge infrastructural leap essentially that needs to happen for these companies to actually bring it about. And so there are going to be whole economies grown around facilitating this, and it's just amazing because I don't see the public demanding it. We're not demanding that we be able to visit our grandma in what you'll see with Zuck and Lex Friedman. This is something being pushed on us.
Yeah, it's the simulacrum industry, right?
And it's almost like in business they call it a loss leader. Like, we're gonna sell this at a loss so that we can get the market share, and we can capture the mind share, and yeah, I think
and we can basically take a further bearish position on human consciousness and the ability to discern threats to their existence.
Right. Oh, the opportunities afforded by this new environment they want to put us in if y'all thought
We're literally sitting ducks.
If y'all thought car registration, was control, getting a speeding ticket was control, just wait.
Wait till you have no option to be in a car because your privilege points are in the negative,
Right.
The social credit score implementation through this virtualization simulacrum.
Oh, it's next level.
Is definitely, it harkens to the whole, technozoic kind of magical surrealism that they've wanted to fetishize technology. They've wanted to create this merger of religion and science around the worship of what technology and the experiences it can afford.
Well, you mentioned was it Harari or something?
Yeah, Harari.
Harari.
He's just one spokesperson.
Yeah.
Long line.
But think
of
about
ideologues,
think about we talked about the foundational discourse that led up to the Guardian removing that Osama bin Laden.
Mm-hmm.
The foundational lead up to what you're about to see with Lex Fridman and Zucker in 30 years of video game, propagation and evolution in, how the video game industry is bigger than Hollywood.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
And now they're moving, of course you can play your favorite sports teams and players in these like simulated games, but now they're getting to the point where they're starting to simulate real life. Mm-hmm. This technology that you're about to see with Lex and Zucker, they talk about how, you can go to your favorite show, your favorite concert, your favorite sporting event. You can stay on your couch, but you can put this headset on, you can still be there. And it's this incremental move to acclimate people to existing as an avatar.
And to have an extremely limited, highly predictable set of motions.
Right.
And movements.
Right. Because I'm sure in that scenario that I just described, you wouldn't be able to go into anything other than a virtual concession stand or bathroom. You wouldn't have true mobility.
Right.
Now, then they'll sell you that later.
Right.
When the technology gets there, it's going to start in a very kind of novel, conceptual implementation, in my opinion, and then it will evolve from there. And before you know it, again, I think even the headset
will eventually become passé.
The headset will eventually be an implant.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. So, anyways, let's play this for a few minutes. We're going to take a quick bio break. And enjoy.
This is so great. Lighting change? Wow.
Yeah, we can put the light anywhere.
And it doesn't feel awkward to be really close to you.
No, it does. I actually moved you back a few feet before you got into the headset. You were right here.
I don't know if people can see this, but this is incredible. The realism here is just incredible. Where am I? Where are you, Mark? Where are we?
You're in Austin, right?
No, I mean this place. We're shrouded by darkness with ultra realistic face. And it just feels like we're in the same room. This is really the most incredible thing I've ever seen. And sorry to be in your personal space.
I mean,
we have done jiu-jitsu before.
Yeah, no, I was commenting to the team before that I feel like we've choked each other from further distances than it feels like we are right now.
I mean, this is just really incredible. I don't know how to describe it with words. It really feels like we're in the same room.
Yeah.
It feels like the future. This is truly, truly incredible. I just wanted to take it in. I'm still getting used to it. It's like, it's you. It's really you. But you're not here with me, right? You're there wearing a headset, and I'm wearing a headset. It's really, really incredible. So what, can you describe what it takes currently for us to appear so photorealistic to each other?
Yeah, so I mean, for background, we both did these scans for this research project that we have at Meta called Codec Avatars. And the idea is that instead of our avatars being cartoony, and instead of actually transmitting a video, what it does is we've sort of scanned ourselves and a lot of different expressions, and we've built a computer model of sort of each of our faces and bodies and the different expressions that we make, and collapse that into a codec that then, when you have the headset on your head, it sees your face, it sees your expression, and it can basically send an encoded version of what you're supposed to look like over the wire. So in addition to being photorealistic, it's also actually much more bandwidth efficient than transmitting a full video, or especially a 3D immersive video of a whole scene like this.
And it captures everything, like the flaws, like to me, the subtleties of the human face, like even the flaws, that's all amazing. It makes it so much more immersive. It makes you realize that like perfection isn't the thing that leads to immersion. It's like the little subtle flaws, like freckles and like variations in color and just
wrinkles,
all stuff
asymmetry.
About noses, asymmetry, and just the different, like the corners of the eyes, like what your eyes do when you smile, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, eyes are a huge part of it. Yeah, I mean, there's all the studies that most of communication, even when people are speaking, is not actually the words that they're saying, right? It's kind of the expression and all that. So, and we try to capture that with the kind of classical expressive avatar system that we have. That's the kind of more cartoon designed one. You can kind of put those kind of expressions on those faces as well. But there's obviously a certain realism that comes with delivering kind of this photorealistic experience that I don't know. I just think it's really magical. I mean, this gets to kind of the core of what the vision around virtual and augmented reality is, of like delivering a sense of presence as if you're there together, no matter where you actually are in the world. And I mean, this experience, I think, is a good embodiment of that, where it's like, I mean, we're in two completely different states halfway across the country, and it just like, looks like you're just sitting right in front of me. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, I mean, I can't. I'm almost getting emotional. It's like it feels like a totally, it's fundamentally new experience. Like for me to have this kind of conversations with loved ones, it would just change everything. Maybe just to elaborate. So I went to Pittsburgh and went through the whole scanning procedure, which has so much incredible technology, so software and hardware going on. But it is a lengthy process. So what's your vision for the future of this in terms of making this more accessible to people?
It starts off with a small number of people doing these very detailed scans, right? Which is that's the version that you did and that I did. And before, there are a lot of people who we've done this kind of a scan for. We probably need to kind of over collect expressions when we're doing the scanning, because we haven't figured out how much we can reduce that down to a really streamlined process, and extrapolate from the scans that have already been done. But the goal, and we have a project that's working on this already, is just to do a very quick scan with your cell phone, where you just take your phone, kind of wave it in front of your face for a couple of minutes, say a few sentences, make a bunch of expressions, but overall have the whole process just be 2 to 3 minutes, and then produce something that's of the quality of what we have right now. So I think that's one of the big challenges that remains. And right now we have the ability to do the scans if you have hours to sit for one. And with today's technology, I mean, you're using a Meta headset that exists. It's a product that's kind of for sale now. You can drive these with that. But the production of these scans in a very efficient way is one of the last pieces that we still need to really nail. And then obviously there's all the experiences around it. I mean, right now we're kind of sitting in a dark room, which is familiar for your podcast. But I think part of the vision for this over time is not just having this be like a video call. I mean, that's fine. It's cool, or it feels like it's immersive. But you can do a video call on your phone. The thing that you can do in the metaverse that is different from what you can do on a phone is like doing stuff where you're physically there together and participating in things together. And we could play games like this. We could have meetings like this in the future. Once you get mixed reality and augmented reality, we could have codec avatars like this and go into a meeting and have some people physically there and have some people show up in this photorealistic form, superimposed on the physical environment. And I think that stuff like that is going to be super powerful. So we got to still build out all those kind of applications and the use cases around it. But I don't know. I think it's going to be a pretty wild next few years around this.
I mean, I'm actually almost at a loss of words. This is just so incredible. This is truly incredible. I hope that people like watching this can get a glimpse of like how incredible it is. It really feels like we're in the same room. Like there is that, I guess there's an uncanny valley that seems to have been crossed here. Like it looks like you.
Yeah,
like
I mean, I think
you.
There's still a bunch of tuning that I think we'll want to do where different people emote to different extents, right? So I think one of the big questions is, like when you smile, how wide is your smile, and how wide do you want your smile to be? And I think getting that to be tuned on a per person basis is going to be one of the things that we're going to need to figure out. It's like, to what extent do you want to give people control over that? Some people might try to, might prefer a version of themselves that's more emotive in their avatar than their actual face is. So for example, I always get a lot of critique and shit for having like a relatively stiff expression. But I mean, I might feel pretty happy, but just make a pretty small smile. So I mean, maybe for me, I would it's actually it's like I'd want to have my avatar really be able to better express like how I'm feeling than how I can do physically. So I think that there's a question about how you want to tune that, but overall, yeah, I mean, we want to start from the baseline of capturing how people actually emote and express themselves. And I mean, I think the initial version of this has been pretty impressive. And like you said, I do think we're kind of beyond the uncanny valley here, where it does feel like you. It doesn't feel weird or anything like that.
I mean, that's going to be the meme that
it doesn't feel weird, except you're wearing a giant headset and they're not actually there. Tuning emotional states like avatar, like this is pretty much it, folks.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically a hyperbolization of the social phenomena that you see out in public today, which is a lot of people are just on their phones, congregating together on their phones, and then that's kind of the social hangout. And so that's been socially engineered, of course, and so they're going to try and take it to the next level where everyone just constantly has something that's interfacing with their ability to perceive reality and everything within it. And if people are constantly engaging in that paradigm, then all the algorithms and the predictive DARPA AI avatarization formulas will then just basically be able to create a simulated real-time aggregation of all objects in the material plane. I mean, that's kind of the whole control grid writ large that they really desire, which is a totally dematerialized kind of soul harvesting program, essentially.
Well, they've already done a lot to do that in the real 3D physical realm.
Mm-hmm.
With predictive analytics, next best action. Everybody's had that kind of experience where they said something to their spouse and then they got on their phone and there was an advertisement, like
exactly what
you're talking about. I had an experience years ago where me and my wife were watching TV, and then we decided to go to the store to pick up some things from the grocery. And we found ourselves in front of yogurt that we already had in our refrigerator. And she's like, do we need yogurt? This yogurt? Are we out? And I was like, no. And she's like, are you sure? And I was like, I'm pretty sure. And then she's like, well, let's just pick it up just in case. And I'm like, okay. And then I thought, the last thing we saw on the TV before we left was a Yoplait or a Fahe or some yogurt company, advertisement. I think we're here right now because we saw that. Like, subconsciously, we're in front of this yogurt right now because we saw that. And we ended up deciding not to get the yogurt, and of course we did have the yogurt. So, like,
Right.
they could have even gotten us the first time, like before that. The reason we had the yogurt in the first place is because of the advertising. And so that's like an example where they're trying to intersect you at the right time based on who you are, and like they try to predict these things. Now take it to the virtualization level where they have so much more capacity to observe what you're doing, what you're saying, what you're thinking, what you're feeling. They're literally talking in here about using these advanced optical technologies to scan you and different computing algorithms to map you out and then infer information from your emotions. And Zuck is talking, he just before you put your headphones on, he was talking about maybe tuning it and giving people the ability. This is one of the things they're struggling with, is how much power do we give people over this technology to like make themselves something that they're not. And he said, I might prefer myself to express myself in a way that I'm not able to do physically. And this is where we get into like genetic engineering as well, because this is happening both in the meta and the physical forms. They're trying to drive us in that direction.
It's similar to Scanner Darkly too, if you've ever seen that one, where people can don these kind of anonymizing digital kind of rotoscope cloaks that hide their identity in the physical world. And so Philip K. Dick had a lot of very prescient, he tapped into a lot of dark technozoic egregores that have been, brewing under the surface in terms of policy and design for a long time. And yeah, this is a step towards that. I mean, if people can, assume whatever, gender expression they want, regardless of whatever their biology is, then what's keeping people from avatarizing themselves as an elephant?
I'll say this. I mean, this might actually have lower suicide rates than gender reassignment surgery.
Well, basically, it's sort of a soft suicide, right? You're
true.
You're sort of evincing the real in favor of this kind of copy, counterfeit simulacrum, and then the whole kind of implication is that, it's all a big strange loop and it's recursive, and for all we know, we're in a transcendental headset within this what we call the physical plane, right? Our own day-to-day existence could, according to the simulation theory, right, just be one hyper realized recursive loop. And that's why there's sort of a glitch in the system, so to speak, where we can come across the very same virtualization tech that eventually can afford what is life itself as we know it, right? That's just the speculation.
Well, I also noticed there's a tendency, especially with the transhumanist kind of intersecting technologies, that they're always rolled out in a way that is helping the disabled. You look at voice to speech transcription and that technology. I think that was Ray Kurzweil,
right,
who's a big transhumanist, and
singularity,
and it's initially rolled out to like help the mute, right, or the deaf, whatever the case may be, right? But then now all of our voice interactions are being recorded
Totally
and transcribed
cataloged,
and cataloged, and sentiment analysis is being done on it, and they're using that. Hey, don't you like having those product recommendations? Don't you like being served relevant advertisements that add value to your life? And you know, a reasonable person might hear that and be like, yeah, sure. But like, is that the ultimate goal? Is that the great nirvana of this technology? Is that why it's being promulgated and you know, funded? And
it's sort of an ancillary surface benefit.
It's
right?
the carrot. It's the
Right.
incentive of adoption. You know, it's kind of like the whole Google paradigm. You know, if the service is free, then you're the product, right? And most people didn't realize when they started Googling that they were actually transferring value to Google.
Yeah, and I mean,
because you got this service from them for free.
right.
That's the carrot on the stick.
Exactly. And that you have to chase that around, but then there's like a punishment, right? Oh, well, if you're not engaging in this brand new way of relating, then you're going to be left behind, and you're a Luddite and a pariah that will be you know, completely eradicated from history. You know?
Yeah.
And so that's the implication, is that it's like we have to gain literacy of this Technozoic era, or else, you know, we're going to go extinct essentially because of scarcity of resources and the chasm around the spinning ball, you know, that it's all closing in on us, you know.
Well, I mean, for a certain segment of society, I think that is largely true. I mean,
the egregore they adhere to. Exactly.
You know, what I see out there now is a lot of people scrambling to become literate in this area of AI, you know, with ChatGPT, and there's legitimate concern that, hey, my job is very repetitive and can be programmed and automated away. What value do I add? And like, I see now it's like ChatGPT is not going to take your job, but other people who you're competing with who use it will take your job. And that may be true right now, but I think the people who are concerned with their jobs being automated and programmed away with AI, they have good reason to be concerned. And it may not be tomorrow, it may not be next year, but this story that many people are being told in the professional community that, well, you just need to learn how to use the technology to your benefit, that may work for some select few, but like, let's not kid ourselves and think that you know, the plan isn't to basically decommission all this human capital and human labor for more cost-effective, maybe less personable, less human AI technologies. I mean, I literally heard a conversation from a long-term care insurance provider who wanted to use AI to help with the underwriting process, but they didn't want to consider any health-related information. And the question I have is, well, how do you expect to assess the risk of an insurance policy if you don't have any health? You just want to spit what into an AI model and then determine whether you'll accept or offer a plan to this particular applicant. Like, that seems almost inherently anti-human.
Oh yeah, it definitely is, man. And again, this is this kind of misanthropic thanatoid hyperbole, right? Like, oh, you know, yeah, humans, you know, we were on the top of the food chain for a long time, but turns out, you know, we have to like sleep and eat and, urinate and defecate, and we go through this messy thing called reproduction, and maybe it's just time to put a cap on that. Maybe it's just time to decommission that entire paradigm. And that's what the Technozoic ideology is all about, is emerging man and machine and creating this kind of ostensible utopia where less than 1 billion people can roam about the terraqueous orb with their demigod technological merger singularity religion, and who knows, everything will be perfect, right? I mean, it's this it's this Lovecraftian dystopia as utopia.
Well, I think that there's a interconnectedness with this drive towards a virtualization, a decommissioning of human capital, an anti-human agenda, it's been called, with the Cerveza virus situation, because that's a culling of the herd.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like, let's just take the dumbest of the people. That's the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
With the Georgia Guidestones,
right.
Maintain a population of 500 million. Of course, they want to cull the herd. Look, and granted, they are probably creating a class of people in this effort who are, from their eyes, less than manageable. Well, they have other plans for them,
right?
know. But like for the really dumb ones, I want to play this hilarious advertisement I saw this morning for.
Oh, this is really
the Spike Vax. I think it's Moderna.
Yep.
Here we go.
When it comes to your health, you do you. You ping and pong that body. You plunge that body. You green that body. You brain power that body. You practice and practice that body. You make it rain that
Spike
body.
Vax.
You flu shot that body. And now you Spikevax that body. Because even though the pandemic is over, COVID-19 isn't. Spikevax by Moderna is a vaccine to help protect you against COVID-19. You shouldn't get Spikevax if you've had an allergic reaction to Spikevax or its ingredients. Rare cases of inflammation of the heart muscle and outer lining have been reported. The most common side effects are injection site pain, redness and swelling, tiredness, headache, muscle pain, chills, joint pain, and fever. Make vaccination against COVID-19.
Did you see? Did you see?
Oops, there it is.
There it is.
Dun, dun, dun,
That's what I said. The interconnectedness here.
And this looks like a guy, and he's in all pink, and with the blue and the white visor. Huh,
he's working from home.
That's
right. For sure.
Yeah.
Man, I gotta say that the jingle is.
Oh,
it's
Lord.
getting me moving. Spikevax.
Ingredients. Rare cases of inflammation of the heart muscle and outer lining have been reported. The most common side effects are injection site pain, redness and swelling, tiredness, headache, muscle pain, chills, joint pain, and fever. Make vaccination against COVID-19 a part of your health routine. Spikevax that body with Spikevax by Moderna.
Spikevax that body.
Jeez.
I love it. It's so in your face. It's the open conspiracy because researchers investigated how SARS-CoV-2 damages heart and muscle cells. Isn't it the spike protein that is the culprit?
Yeah. So yeah, according to the narrative.
Spikevax.
But hey, just this is
you need those
ritual,
spike
right?
proteins. Get that spike.
Right. You do all of these things based on what people's telling you is good for you. Go ahead and do this that we say is good for you. Y'all are unthinking herds. That's the whole implication of all these advertises is,
I want to make another callback to our last episode. We revisited a January 2020 episode, top 20 mega singularities, and one of the things we covered in there was health wars, and we sort of preempted the conversation on Cerveza virus. If you have a couple brain cells, like it wasn't even prescient at the time. It was relevant, like this drive to a forcible intervention with your body, injecting you, getting you acclimated to the medical authorities. I mean, that the public health bureaucracy had been growing for so many years prior to. It was easy to see that, like, a very possible mega singularity of 2020 was exactly what we saw, Cerveza virus.
Oh, yeah.
And we talked about it, and the commercial we played at that time was Skyrizi, which I don't know, they're talking about Crohn's disease here, but I thought it was like on my way to clear skin, for people, what is it, eczema and psoriasis and things of that nature. And
I have moderate to severe plaque psoriasis.
I don't know if this is the exact commercial that we played back then. This one looks a little bit more contemporary, but in the original, it's called. Oh, look, it was there. It is there. Okay. The chemtrail in the background. Now, of course, it looks like one of these like air show planes or whatever, but in the original, it was almost even more pronounced, like they crisscross, like you often see. And I saw this and I laughed, just like I laughed at the spike facts when I saw it, and I was just like, cause and effect. Like, we're spraying the entire atmosphere with all these experimental concoctions at high altitude. Literally. And I'm not even debating that people don't have these various skin diseases. To me, they're so related. It's like, do you know something, Moderna? Do you know something, Pfizer? Like, of course. It just seems too uncanny, the openness, like you say, the open conspiracy with both Spikevax and Skyrizi.
It's in the
Skyrizi. Yes, it's telling you.
Well, see, and that's the thing, is the medications and these, words of art and all these, kind of subtle mockeries of people's intelligence at large. It's part of the psychological operation of demoralization.
Yes.
Right. It's all about demoralizing the population and getting them acclimated to surrendering whatever semblance of autonomy and self-determination they have left. It didn't. I think Harari literally just came out and was like, it really is for your own good to surrender all of your freedoms to the elite to decide what's best for you going forward. So don't try to, latch on to these things called, national or individual rights. These things are of a pre-Technozoic paradigm that it was misled in its ability to imagine the proper future for humankind, which is this top-down, technotronic kind of system that, again, through incremental development and mobilization has reached a point where they feel like they can just turn up the heat and it won't matter. The water's at 180 degrees, the frog still hasn't moved, we're real close here. Let's go ahead and turn up the heat.
And it's like the time scale, like what did we say earlier, the life cycle of propaganda is shortening. I may have insinuated that was like maybe positive. In some ways it is, but at the same time, like, because it's shortening, they're able to just move on to the next thing. How about the Las Vegas shooting?
Right.
Just swept under the rug, like all these different major events just swept under the rug. Sam Bankman-Fried and Epstein and the Joe Biden, like, total hallucination presidency, humiliation ritual. Absolutely. It has like its own momentum, and I feel like we're in almost like slow motion. We're like in this slow motion before some new major
accelerant or
yeah. Conflagration, because it just feels like
Here's my prognostication. They've got to merge several agendas in at once, just like they did with Cerveza virus.
Mm-hmm.
So this time around, they've got to merge the financial debacle, and it's probably going to be post-election. They're going to try and kick the can through this next year. And
how I'm sorry to interrupt, but how is the debt ceiling not a national joke?
Literally, since it's been raised, it's over another. It's like another.
Can I get an SNL skit
right
on this? It was just a matter of weeks ago they passed something
it's already
to raise it, and now we're talking about it again.
Right.
But go on with your point.
But that is part of the broader point, basically, which is that look, they've created a economic paradigm that's designed to fail. It's hyper fragile because it's over centralized. It's not really backed on anything, and really the vast majority of the U.S. economy is a monetization of debt fueled consumption. I mean, we used to be a net exporter. We used to be an industrial kind of self-sufficient powerhouse in the post-war era, and those in a lot of ways were kind of the best days in terms of generational growth outlook. And but unfortunately, with the rise of the or the lack of a gold standard, and then the rise of fractional reserve banking, modern monetary theory, Keynesian, Ponzonomics, basically, where you treat debt as future money, essentially. So why not just print stuff indefinitely? Because this is what we think the amount of money will occur in the future to be. It's almost like they're treating hypothecated, made up units as indistinguishable from all of the real wealth that had been built prior. And it's from this position of the board or the corporate Borg from on high that gets to set the price of money. And at that point, it's like a pyre. It's this thing that's ready to just be lit from the base. And this is where I wanted to go with that last rejoinder, which is they've got to combine different agendas. And so I think that it's going to be a cyber attack that basically cripples a lot of the banking system.
It would be easy to do.
And they're going to blame that cyber attack on something like terror cells that are related to Hezbollah and Palestine and Putin.
Yeah.
Right. It's going to be some kind of combination effect.
When anything like this happens,
it has to be a combined narrative.
Given the context of like what we've talked about so far with the avatarization of reality, we haven't talked. I mentioned it just very briefly. The hallucination, CGI Joe, hologram Joe presidency, and how that's just largely been swept under the rug. If you're just listening, I've got an article up about this is like passe almost conversation. I've heard people I would not have expected to hear this from talk openly without reservation about the possibility that our president is like alter ego. That's just like swept under the rug, and like the lack of alarm in the public with respect to these financial, like all this stuff is coming together, and I just don't see the urgency or the concern as we should. And
Well, again, people have been anesthetized and fluoridated and, bludgeoned into the ground with inflation and debt and all these things that it's all part and parcel to the takeover.
But like, you can have all these open conspiracies, and you can have this awareness of new technology that's going to take your job, but like, I don't see the kind of recognition in how that can be used to fabricate world events. And so when this new conflagration takes place, if it's a cyber attack, for example, they can make up anything they want.
Right.
And nobody has any way of verifying it, because you're just trying to make ends meet working from home. You know what I mean? Like,
that's the paradigm they've already set
where
up.
do you go?
Yeah.
There was an episode in the latest season of Black Mirror called Joan is Awful, and it's about this woman who is like an HR person, and she had to fire somebody, and she has this horrible interaction. It was like a friend of hers, but she had to fire her to keep her job. She goes home that night and she's upset of what happened, but what happened, and then she turns on Netflix like parallel in the show, and she ends up watching what happened to her that day. And it's like all simulated with, it's like other actors and famous people in contemporary society playing the roles of the various characters that she interacted with that day. And it was like so uncanny. She's like, what am I watching here? And so the story, that's how it starts, and she basically comes to realize that there's like an AI, there's so much surveillance happening. Someone's buying that data and creating these automated movies that are being promulgated on this Netflix parallel in the show. And she wants to like sue them for defamation, because everybody else that was like the hot thing on that platform that night. And so everybody would watch it, and then they all realize it was her. It was so obvious it was her. Right. And so she like tries to sue the company, and the company ends up being like basically a central server, right, that's running all these programs. And it makes me wonder, like, with this upcoming conflagration that we sense almost like animals do before a tsunami, or even what's going on in Gaza and this and that, like, everybody has an opinion on it, but like ultimately all the information we have is just basically given to us. None of us are there, and
again, we've created a society and an economy that is increasingly based around the need to harness and promulgate attention. So the social engineers have essentially created this web of control that is now so easily manipulable that the range of possibility for the kind of things that they can attempt to pull off has just gotten to a crazy fever pitch. And again, what have they already gotten away with that's hidden in plain view? I mean, just the whole composite characterology of these world historic individuals on the world stage. I mean, it really could be much more literal that the world is a stage than what we've been led to believe. And maybe it's not just a trite metaphor. It could in
literally
fact be quite literal, and that's one of the most effective means of control is this world historic individual characterology and all this role play on the world stage, and having these characters be represented by perhaps multiple individuals or perhaps, manufactured entities, for all we know. I mean, I really think that this hidden in plain view conspiracy goes into much more absurd fields than we can possibly imagine. This includes the ex machina, hyper realistic Androborg thesis.
I'll never forget the time I went through JFK Customs and there was a TSA hologram basically keeping us in line.
And those are only going to get more and more realistic.
Right.
More and more in your face and customized. And, I was thinking about this. You were referring earlier about the whole... There won't be a need for a headset in this VR, AR simulacrum that they're trying to build. It could be an implant. And part of that implant would be to graft onto your field of vision all of these holographic, interactable, micro eye twitch, sentiment graphing analysis type tech that really, when you go back to this, it's really military advancements.
Right.
This is another form of innovation technologically that's gone hyperbolic, similar to communications, is visual manipulation through these same interfaces, screenification. But again, there's an ulterior motive to its normalization and ubiquity in society. And part of that is this kind of anesthetization, this kind of hypnotic relay that has been pervasive in the society through all of these selected technological advancements that have been allowed to populate, that have been allowed to generate all kinds of mega corporate boondoggles, essentially.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely immense. And the media is really one of the biggest players in that, because a lot of the investment came from people who were involved in large scale information transmission systems. And that also, a lot of the telecommunications and that kind of stuff, that's also an outgrowth of a lot of military applications. So again, it's this kind of company store, hyper militarized, top down command and control economy that they're trying to glamorize. They're trying to turn it into this paradigm for the new epoch, and we're going to transcend the limitations of biology and democracy and individuality and even our own biology to a sort of new vista, a new horizon of possibilities. And again, what really are those possibilities going to look like? I mean, it's not going to be equally distributed, and at the end of the day, it's going to just make the current paradigm more and more vicious in its outlay and in its attitude towards the vestiges of old world human considerations and human values. These things are going to become more seen as defects to our consciousness. Morality, constraint, biological limitations, all these things have to just go out the window. And it's this hyper Mephistophelian kind of Faustian bargain that this technotronic era is trying to usher in within human consciousness. And that's really kind of a long philosophical way of framing the power of mythos in human knowledge systems, and that the power of a story and a narrative and perceived benefit is used as the best possible power of suggestion to implement mechanisms that are really designed for enslavement and not freedom. But as the whole Goethe quote goes, none is more enslaved than he who falsely believes he's free. And so that's the kind of paradigm that they're trying to usher in, is as long as people think that this is the height of progress and that, this is, the magical merger of man and machine and life and to matter, then that's going to be the reality that people accept. People accept the reality with which they're presented. It is the whole thesis.
I think that economic destruction goes hand in hand with this transformation to a virtual metaverse, because people have to have an incentive to adopt a new way of being. And I don't think they've provided, in one sense they've been very successful in creating that escape route for people, like I talked about earlier, the promulgation of video games and virtual environments, MMORPGs, massively multiplayer, role-playing games and things of that nature have, people live out their lives in front of these things.
Yeah.
And some more than others. Some are, they treat it like a recreational activity, like watching a movie or something. But then others wake up and that's their life. So that conversion process has already happened.
Mm-hmm.
And, in the past, it was, and maybe even still to this day, it's justifiably so ridiculed, that kind of addictive behavior, because it's like you're living out a fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
But increasingly I see that behavior being encouraged, and not just in video game world, but like people are being encouraged to embrace fantasies and to live out fantasies and to pretend to be something that they're not.
Mm-hmm.
And that plays into this, you mentioned the society's become so manipulable.
Mm-hmm.
If you're so manipulable as to believe that you are not in the correct body or something like that, you'll believe anything.
Mm-hmm.
You'll adopt any new fad. And man, haven't we seen that with the whole LGBTQ plus? Like, they keep adding letters to the acronym, and it's been taken to absurdist lengths.
It's a religion. It's a huge mass misconception.
It started with like gay marriage,
mm-hmm.
and now we're at
teachers
trans-special, transracial, transabled. It's just it's reached a feverish pitch.
Well, it's kind of like the glamorization of disability to a great extent. If you can claim a certain victim status or a certain oppressed minority designation, that gives you a sense of virtue and meaning and purpose and uniqueness. That those aspects that you adopt ideologically are the only things worthwhile about your individuality. And insofar as that you want to have individual worth, you have to adopt the kosher labels and trends that allow you to be accepted in this new normal, right? And that is going to just continue on and on until people realize that deception comes in many forms, but perhaps the most pernicious form is self-deceit that is monetized and narcissistically encouraged in the society, right? So that's a glamorization of disability. Is if people can basically abstain from wanting excellence and superior conditions, bettering and growing into the future, and become content with basically this mediocrity principle of, whatever affliction you can turn into a trendy label, that's where all your value is going to be. It's another type of inversion narrative that is, I think, part and parcel to the whole kind of social justice, subsidiarism sort of outlook. And it's communistic, to each according to his need, to each according to his ability. This isn't just about labor. This is about worth designation and existential value in the society from person to person, right? It's like I think it was either Bernard Shaw or H.G. Wells who said that in the future there will be a board that decides your existential worth, and the reality is that board may not be composed of people. That could be the AI super implementation is deciding whether you're disposable or not, based on your input carbon footprint budget as a life form, as an entity, and we can blame the globe on this kind of scarcity psychosis to a great extent. Our cosmology and our way of thinking about reality has precipitated and allowed that kind of egregore to build over time.
Well, that reminds me of the ESG agenda, because they're doing that sort of worth or that value calculation on the individual level. They're also doing it on the corporate level, and that's just going to trickle down to the individuals, because companies are just people getting together to do something, right? And California passed this law which imposes significant disclosure requirements related to climate goals beginning January 1st, and it's basically anybody doing business in California. Now they're probably only going to go after companies who are doing more than $1 billion a year at first, but it's setting a precedent for something that's already been manifesting in the financial and regulatory circles, and that's basically, how do we assess your sustainability quotient, which is such an Orwellian term, if you ask me. Sustainability quotient, because the ESG stands for what? Environmental, social
and governance.
Yeah. And it's like there's almost a market. I don't know that it's been standardized, this ESG score. I think there are different companies vying to promote their own version of the ESG score, which takes into account different factors. But you understand how onerous it is to report on your greenhouse gas emissions. You have employees who exhale greenhouse gas. You have potentially factories or cars or buses, and it's this is just ridiculous. CO2, and if you don't comply with these disclosure, they're going to impose fines. And so there's this whole economy being built around helping organizations comply with the law. And so they're going to start, now it's going to be part of your score is going to be, okay, so you work with 10,000 different suppliers. You also need to work with the most sustainable suppliers. So it just goes on and on and on. That's why I say it trickles down to the individual, and whether you have an ESG score or not today or tomorrow, you will have one sooner, the sooner these companies fall in line with what Daddy Gov says. And so ESG is almost an extension of your we already have a social credit score. It's called the credit score.
Right. That's the Fair Isaac Corporation.
And it's tied to your social security number, your social surveillance number. So like these America First people who don't also acknowledge that we already have what China has, we invented it. Mm-hmm. China implemented it more strictly than we did, but we still have it.
And by we, it's really just the fact that we've been the guinea pig population for this type of stuff for way longer than China. China is just kind of rapidly implemented more features quicker.
Everybody can read about IBM's involvement in the Holocaust.
Right.
Not to say anything about the veracity of the statistics coming out of the Holocaust. Right. Oh, am I anti-Semite now? Right. But that's an American company.
Right.
You know, so like the social credit score, it's already 1.0, 1.5, 2.0. It's just they're just getting ready for the next one, the newest version.
And this is a further demoralization, it's a further dehumanization kind of thing, because then if you're trying to inventory every single thing that people do and relegate it to this number, this carbon budget allotment or credit.
It's the Bill Gates cow fart measurement plan.
Right. Mine your own, crypto identity coin or something by going on a treadmill in your smart city. Right. I mean,
it's smart because you don't have to think it for yourself. Right. You just do what you're told. But of course, to buy into these new frameworks that they're building for us, you have to believe in some sense in global warming.
Right.
This ball with this other ball around it, which is made of gas and gravity, and it holds everything in like a plastic greenhouse. When the sun hits it and the heat rises inside, it can't escape because gravity's holding it all together. And I just want to highlight this hilarious satire article by USA Today. Put this on the ZNN Telegram. If you're not a member, you should be.
Oh my! See, they're just giving up the ghost at this point. It really seems. I mean, it's like the Sky Rizzy, Spike Vax kind of stuff where
Spike Vax,
where this pseudoscience industrial complex in the charlatanry matrix is just kind of pulling off all the stops and just doing open conspiracy outlays at this point. Like, yeah, of course we're faking this. We're putting it in your face, and this is your religion. You've been programmed to believe that this is you.
Can you read? Can we read the headline for the people listening in?
Lost in space, astronauts drop tool bag into orbit that you can see with binoculars.
Yeah, the only tool bag is the person who believes that.
In your face, exactly. I mean, they're just pulling out all the stops and just mocking people's intelligence to an absurdist extent. It's almost like they're getting bored with how much they do it and how flagrant and much they get away with it at this point. It's almost like a bragging.
It's kind of like hubris, like a serial killer who leaves increasingly obvious clues as to who they are.
Exactly, because it's like that's part sort of criminal psychology. Eventually,
they almost want to be caught.
Right. Eventually they kind of want to be caught because they have a sense of invulnerability that is like the pride before the fall, sort of.
Yeah.
And I think that is really the biggest silver lining to this, is that they're just kind of putting all the cards on the table and leveraging.
They're throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what sticks. It feels like.
Yes, absolutely. And
I feel like we've been actually in that since the beginning of 2020 for sure. Yep. Like, because at that time, wasn't Epstein like late 2019?
Yep.
that all hit the fan, and
That was a
then
big
it was
disclosure.
like
Yeah.
Greta Thunberg.
Right.
They tried that hand, and then it went to Cerveza virus,
Mm-hmm.
and then shortly thereafter it was George Floyd racism,
Right.
and then the Midwest like burning and riots and all of that. We probably had a couple of different shootings,
Yep.
and of course throughout the whole thing you've got the Joe Biden hallucination that we're all experiencing virtually,
Yep.
of course. And it just feels like spaghetti against the wall. Let's see what sticks, and nothing is sticking.
200 billion. Let's just print it up and give it to Ukraine. You know,
How many debt ceilings have been raised in that
Right.
time frame? Less and less spaghetti is sticking, which I regard as a positive, but on
Yes.
the other hand, like we talked about before, there seems almost it's almost more imminent. It seems more imminent than it normally would the faster that all takes place.
well, it's like a event. It seems like they're kind of getting cornered a little bit. It's becoming more obvious, and that's a cornered rat. It lashes out.
That's the Osama bin Laden letter to America thing. I mean, it seemed like it really triggered him.
Yeah, because they're like, oh wait, this completely ruins another, as if the narrative wasn't already
Dead.
completely dead, and dragged through every inch of mud you can imagine. Because the official narrative on
Did we ever end the war on terror? Like, did we
No,
ever? Was there ever an official statement about like we won, guys?
No, it's all come home to roost against the American public, the very same people who were, taxed half to death to weaponize this whole infrastructure against us. I mean, that's what it's like a vampiric mafia order that sucks resources from the very object it wishes to consume. And there's a great clip of this specific type of wasp that in its incubation phase before it hatches basically parasitizes this caterpillar, and one of the larvae, genetically speaking, is only designed to control the mind of the caterpillar as a bacterial parasite.
I have it. Do you want to play it?
Yeah. That clip is this shows you what's happening to our economy and our society.
Our parasitized caterpillar
Right
has spent
now.
the last 12 days gorging itself. It now appears profoundly obese. But this is not all fat. The glomerata wasp larvae lie just under its skin. Each is the size of a grain of rice, but together they account for over a third of the caterpillar's weight. The larvae have not yet finished growing and need to keep their host alive. So although they feast on the caterpillar's blood, they have been careful not to touch a single one of its vital organs.
Played this for the kids.
This uneasy truce will not last. Within days, the larvae are fully matured. Suddenly, they begin to stir into action. For the past 2 weeks, this surrogate womb has protected them, but now they no longer need it. To complete the next stage of their life cycle, they must break out. The caterpillar's thick skin should be a solid barrier to the parasitic wasp larvae. But as their bodies have grown, they have developed tiny saw-like teeth. These jagged jaws are for one job only: cutting their way out. Stroke by stroke, the larvae slice through the tough layers of skin. At the same time, they release chemicals that paralyze the caterpillar. As the larvae break through, there is nothing it can do. Free at last, the larvae enter a new phase of development. They swiftly spin silken cocoons. These will provide the perfect environment for their final transformation.
That's what we're up against, folks.
But ironically, one of the greatest dangers the
bunch of
larvae will
worms.
face is being themselves impregnated by other species of parasitic wasp. Incredibly, the wounded caterpillar helps them out.
Can you say wars in the Middle East,
spin a
guys?
silken blanket to make its own cocoon. But the parasitized caterpillar spins his blanket on top of the wasp cocoons, giving them an extra layer of protection.
Huh.
That's kind of
Sounds
where we're
oddly
at.
familiar.
Funding our own destruction.
That infected it weeks before has now invaded the caterpillar's brain and caused this bizarre corruption of its normal behavior.
Ah.
Amazingly, the caterpillar's natural aggression is now also exploited by the wasp virus.
Oh, God. It's actually a perfect analogy, isn't it?
The caterpillar
Spike facts. Spike facts.
Yeah, they're chewed through the skin at this point,
Spike facts your body.
and now they're weaving the cocoon and using the parasitized remainder brain of the caterpillar to defend the last stage before their final form. And we have the general public has to understand that is like a near perfect biological analog to what's occurring on a macro level.
Spike facts your body.
You know, of course, it's not just America, but I mean, we're in America, and it's just the most apropos biological dilemma analogy that I can come up with. I mean, it's very apropos, and it's very direct to the point. And yeah, the American apparatus, the American structure and paradigm is basically, you know, it's already been hollowed out, and now it's being used as this tool to defend this breakaway civilization, you might say. The whole Eurasian supercontinent, you know, 21st century new hegemony that is like the wasp being birthed out of the caterpillar, used to protect and incubate it the entire time. I mean, and how did China get so big? How did they get so wealthy? You know, buying hundreds of thousands of tons of gold and stuff.
Well, that's the one of the other big like epiphanies I had. I was traveling to visit my brother through China to get to Japan, and I was on a Chinese airline, and they were playing for their passengers on all the TV screens this like government funded infomercial about the Federal Reserve and how the American reserve currency has it such that, you know, they're borrowing money from us, and we're sending products to them, and it was all based on this like gold reserve system that they broke the trust of. And I was like, I'm definitely seeing Chinese propaganda here, but it's like anti-American. However, it's not totally inaccurate.
Well, right. They're leaving out a few key agenda components of why the Federal Reserve was even formed in the first place.
And what involvement the Chinese government had in its formation, and who broke whose trust. You know, it's like they're pointing the finger at the Federal Reserve Board, but
guess what? That entire movement percolated into Russia with the Bolsheviks that then went to China, you know, around the same time. It's all of a piece, you know, that whole putsch was a worldwide putsch after World War One.
Well, that's where like I raise my eyebrow at like Benjamin Fulford's stance on this, because he's done a lot of reporting on the formation of the Federal Reserve and the Hilton Green Memorial Agreement, and like the Chinese and the Asian, he calls it the Asian secret society's like role in setting up and providing the collateral for the world reserve system. You know, I don't know what to believe. I just don't trust that like there's a good guy and a bad guy in this.
No.
Which is his insinuation that like the Asian secret society, they wanted humanitarian projects to be funded and world peace, and of course the Federal Reserve didn't deliver that, and now they need their money back, you know, the collateral that they provided, and this is the source of like a bunch of, you know, world chess games being played out, you know, on the world stage. And I am leaning more towards, you know, they would like us to believe they're at odds with one another, and they might position for political reasons
and counter signal each other.
This kind of thing on the world stage. But like all the closed door meetings, like they're coming to peaceable agreements, and they're going to get their, you know, various concessions, and you know, we just get the whole trickle down effect. But like the thing that is notable about this epoch we're in is that and again, we've talked about the hearsay factor of history itself. I don't think, unless I'm wrong, that there's ever been a world reserve currency. And so that's what's unique about this collapse we're about to see is it's not gonna just impact like one specific region. It's gonna be a world change.
I guess you could say that there were hegemonic currencies in the past.
Sure.
Right. The guilder and the pound.
There was way more decentralized finance happening at that stage of human development, if we're to believe, you know, the mainstream.
Right. But you're right. In terms of a worldwide non-backed fiat debt,
centrally
controlled system, then it's basically been unprecedented prior to the 70s, or the post-war era, and then especially since 71, after there was no gold standard. So but then the problem is you bring in the whole like Bix Weir side of it, which is like, well, they probably have an ace up their sleeve in the sense that they know that there's all these more gold deposits all over the place on these federal lands. They could easily tap all this stuff to like back this, you know, maybe in between or limited hangout paradigm where they temporarily reset the currency on a gold standard, and then that's like it's sort of a layover until they rehypothecate everything in a digital paradigm. and that there's like a hangover or layover period that could last, I don't know, a number of years or a decade or more.
That's one of the flaws I see in Bix's point of view is he looks at the publicly stated above ground available like gold supply, and then the what's publicly mined, right? And he talks about the undisclosed, what is it, Grand Canyon and Yosemite's gold and all this, these unreported deposits, which are in anybody's guess custody, as this ace up their sleeve, trump card essentially at any point. This is why the entire market is so tightly controlled from a fiat perspective, and they're able to basically manage this decoupling in a way that's advantageous only to them. But he also says, silver is basically exempt from these same factors, and so that's why it's a better short-term like vehicle if you want to survive what's coming. Essentially, gold, it'll still do well relative to the dollars, but relative to silver, and the flaw I see is we're reliant on what's publicly stated to be available.
Right.
It is true
exactly.
that a lot of silver is consumed and destroyed and is basically unrecoverable at these dollar prices. They might some of it could become recoverable, if silver was $1,000 an ounce, then it would be worth it to go try and pull it out of the TVs and this and that. But if they have these hidden caves of gold that is unreported, wouldn't it stand to reason they would also have hidden caves of silver?
Well, right, because silver is a byproduct of gold.
They're found together in the same,
typically. Yeah.
So I don't know.
But I think that the main thing I think he's trying to argue there is the ratio is off, so that realistically the amount of silver that you could actually garner as an investment from that exploration is many times, the ratio is many times closer than the current one. It's more like 1 to 20 as opposed to 1 to 86 or whatever it is today. So there could be, in other words, like a 4x outperformance of silver if such a paradigm were to ever get rolled out as a sort of emergency remediation of the sovereign debt crisis, right? I mean, and it's not out of the realm of possibility. It's certainly a possibility that they could default back to this, I think probably fool's errand of trying to rehypothecate the entire world economy based on gold. I mean, I think that you'd have to set the price of gold at like $1 million an ounce or something.
Well, I mean, he has a point. The central banks own all the gold already. So, most of it, the majority, compared to silver, which is more well circulated in people's hands.
I think of like all
I don't disagree with the investment thesis. I just think when you're talking about undisclosed deposits, all bets are off. Well, I mean, we can look at like the natural ratio between gold and silver as it's discovered, and maybe he has a point there. But
and there's also counterfeiting gold, right? The ability for more and more sophisticated ways of fooling authentication measures, right? I mean, so there's all kinds of problems with that, right? But at the same time, I just I think that the sovereign debt issue is a little bit of kind of a little bit of a red herring at the end of the day, because there hasn't been any real assessment or auditing of any of these holdings or any of these central bank bodies the world over. It's like the mafia buys out the police department to conduct its investigation as to whether it's engaged in corruption. The central banks, they don't have any desire to create better conditions for the common person, because their whole system is based on robbing the vast majority of people from the future. I mean, the whole debt-based economic Keynesian model is this anti-deflationary, anti-free market conviction, which is that it's better to have a central authority basically just issue monies into the economy and plan the distribution over time based on future promised growth from a money that is completely decoupled from any physical constraint. So, by that measure, it would stand to reason that the way that they can digitize this kind of insane goal is by doing like expiry based tokens. So they can issue like a UBI, but you can only spend it at these big corporate outlets, these big corporate stores. And again, this could be a solution in the event of a huge meltdown of the current banking system, right? Which I've always argued is basically like the Blockbuster Video of finance. I mean, brick and mortar banks and the way that they conduct their affairs, right? I mean, you want to talk about like greenhouse gas, carbon emissions. I mean, that's a perfect pretext to basically condemn the banking system and then render its most vulnerable aspects known, and then roll out this digital alternative. And it's like, oh, well, now it's resilient because it's more sustainable. And then they can create a whole new derivatives market based on sustainability volatility in the
right.
It's a never-ending.
That extends to every industry, really, and the whole moniker of sustainability is so Orwellian.
Yes,
it reminds me of the
Cerveza,
the Cerveza virus times. What were they called?
Essential workers.
Right? Yeah, essential.
Gotta flatten the curve. Right? Again, just sort of admitting all of these egregores kind of out in the open, right? And so part of me is like, well, they love to create controlled opposition, right? That's one of their favorite tactics, is to gerrymander an issue of importance or a topic of real concern, and then turn it into this myopic back and forth that they can control both sides of. And at the end of the day, that's what the whole greenhouse gas climate change paradigm is all about. People still at the end of the day agree that we're on a terraqueous orb space testicle that is an anomaly in this vacuous chasm, and that paradigm in and of itself invites the very scarcity psychosis and totalitarian sense of urgency to catalog all the world's resources and curb population and all this stuff. So at the end of the day, it's a controlled dialectic, whether or not people are skeptical of climate change data or they think that these policies need to be enacted, is because at the end of the day, they all agree that we're on, Mother Gaia spaceship Earth, and this is all we've got, and maybe we really need to tighten the belts and batten the hatches, and
and I feel like we
have to discard the entire cosmology in the pseudoscientific system in the first place, so that none of these false scarcity psychosis totalitarian appeals work on the population anymore. People know that they're hiding resources. People know that they're curbing exploration artificially. People know that they're censoring cartography. People know that the surveillanceification is to keep people on the reservation, plantation, hellhole, post-Diluvian slag heap realm. We're being contained, and we're like an experimental, guinea pig population.
I I think you've encapsulated and articulated that point more clearly than anybody I've ever heard on any podcast. I think Eddie Bravo has touched on this a little bit.
A little bit. But again, fleshing out like the full big picture ramifications.
I see a lot in the, let's say, fringe content creator realm where we dwell, a reluctancy to talk about the motives. And you just touched on, like, you just put perfectly the motives to lie about, at a minimum, how much land there is or how big this thing that we're on is. And even if they're not, they are, like you just said, restricting travel. Mm-hmm. They're confining the explorable land. They could be and are hiding land, and
all the suppressed technology.
We've had a couple of episodes now with Adam Green, where he asked that question. We also talked to Nathan Oakley,
right?
And he didn't care to talk about the motives, but I think that's like the most important, interesting aspect to any of these alternative like viewpoints on how things are. And I think one debate is the shape of the earth, right?
Or just like the dimensional constraints of how we imagine the earth to exist is really, but like, the bigger,
regardless of who's right and who's wrong in that arena, I don't think it can be debated that they are sequestering us into a situation where we really can't explore all that is there. And even if you believe in the globe conception of the world, I think it's a valid consideration to the cartographic censorship, and maybe even that Earth, which is very limited in that conception, is there's more to be explored than what they're telling us. And then likewise with the whole hyperplane idea, you still have to contend with that,
right?
Because
it's still an unknown. We don't know its full dimensional outlay. That's the nature of the beast,
right?
So of course we're not going to have a fine-tuned closed feedback loop belief perseverance model that reverse engineers all calculations and observations to conform to it in the first place, begging the question that it has to exist, which is the whole globe psychosis to begin with. It's built on a begging the question fallacy and in unprovable presuppositions. But that notwithstanding, a lot of this scientismic incorporated paradigm is really just a giant conditioning process for totalitarianism. And expert rule, oligopoly epistemology is basically the small slivers of what's allowed to be understood as science today, right? And Science Incorporated and the Obtuse Academy and
this is another thing where these things kind of come together for me, because we talked a lot about the conflagration in Israel-Palestine. But one of the things that I posted on the ZNN Telegram, and if you're not a member, you should be, go to Zetetic.news, and there's a Telegram button on the sidebar. Join the discussion. But I posted this link about some military operation happening in these underground tunnels going to and from under Israel and Gaza.
There's actually quite a bit of subterranean infrastructure.
And of course, they have their various excuses, ancient civilization, blah, 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 modern tunnels as well. We do tunneling, right, all the time. But I just think it's very underappreciated by the public. It's also underreported, so it's no wonder nobody generally is like focused on it. But the sheer amount of subterranean infrastructure
From
that
the
exists
old world,
from the old world that is still usable and viable and structurally sound, such that there are whole operations taking place. I think it's astounding. It's also alarming, because to me it indicates there's a lot that could be concealed down.
Oh, absolutely.
So we talk about cartographic, and everybody wants to like focus on
subterranean censorship.
There's
Absolutely.
subterranean censorship, and the kind of operations that could be carried out subterranean and go undetected, like,
it boggles the mind.
boggles the mind.
I mean, think about all the pneumatic lines. How many of those are still in commission? Right? Oh, we had to discontinue those lines because we had to put in modern utilities.
Sure.
I mean, how many of these pneumatic lines are still in existence and operable through special, access points?
Right.
That are, again, genuine top security clearance that goes even beyond a lot of government.
Right.
So that's the kind of superstructure that I'm kind of referring to.
We covered in a previous show the Biltmore estate here in North Carolina, which it's like publicly known in the town around Biltmore, Asheville, that there are vast subterranean tunnel systems, some of which go from underneath the Freemasonic Lodge all the way to underneath the steps of Biltmore. And this was all done like horse and buggy style before hydraulics and electronics, and that's a modern contemporary example of the vast, and go look up Colin Furze on YouTube.
Oh yeah.
He's an engineer who dug a tunnel from under his house to his garage by hand. He was like sponsored by some banks to do this for his YouTube channel. And of course he earns from his YouTube as well, but like the amount of effort when you see him do it by hand to dig these tunnels, like it's mind-boggling. And then to think about how much tunneling we've done since even World War II that hasn't been disclosed to the public. I'm talking about deep underground military bases, subterranean nuclear waste disposal sites, deep mountain military bases to protect from nuclear war, like whole cities. It's like a honeycomb Earth.
Yes, and that's again, I'm sort of the conviction of sort of infinite dimensionality in really all directions with unique outlays. So that means imminent infinity, subterranean infinity, above the head infinity. We don't know the full extent, but this idea that down is a temporary direction on a ball. If it's truly a discrete orb,
then you come out the other side,
and then automatically you're up.
Dig a hole to China,
and it's all relative. So really, down is only a temporary direction that's supposedly only
then it becomes
1,500 miles, and then automatically it now becomes an upward vector that's coming out through the antipode. And that's a classic example of how it's just a mythological mystery school idol that's being hypostatized and reified and superimposed and projected onto actual coordinates. The actual coordinate plane is being wrapped around a mythically conjured...
That's the hypothetical celestial sphere.
The celestial sphere. And actually, interestingly enough, on one of Adam's recent interviews with David Skirbina basically referenced the same line of criticism that I introduced to him about the celestial sphere. And
I'll have to listen to that.
How this is a mystery school invention. People are taught to believe all kinds of things that are not true. That this is a... And he was remarkably silent and deferent on that note because
he might have heard it before.
He might have heard it before, my man. So a lot of these.
Well, that's why I brought him up earlier.
Congeal.
He didn't want to talk about motives, but he asked that question on our previous show, and you gave him a similar rundown, and hopefully it was food for thought for him. And
it's going to continue to be for anyone.
He might have some sleepless nights.
Or at least maybe dream inspired of new possibilities and new paradigms. And I think that it is important to realize that. A lot of these excogitations, right? These thought formation experiments and the life of the mind, it's all a fascinating development. And in that sense, the idea of a ball world is or an oblate spheroid or whatever fine tuning mythos characterization they want to implement on it, it's still seen within a progression of social engineering, power of suggestion, tactics and techniques for shaping a body politic to behave and think in a certain way. And really it's one of the oldest censorship campaigns, I would argue. And in that sense, it's a very powerful symbolic continuity into today that people still adhere to that as a literal representation when it clearly isn't a literal representation. You look at any globe at any dimension, it's going to say not an accurate representation.
Well, that's why hopefully you guys like our thumbnail for
we're getting ready to throw
show.
that ball in the fire. Absolutely,
because it's got Xavier here sitting presumably before Biltmore in like a cave structure with a globe and some scrolls that he's writing on.
Maybe the old Samothracian Kabiri mystery initiation rites. Yeah, the hieratic rites and ascending to the gods and the seven heavens and all this stuff. This is all dovetailed into the mythos of the celestial sphere and the planets and all of these hypostatizations of the mind. So that's the whole thing about pseudoscience charlatan matrix is most people are inculcated into a paradigm where the proclamations of reality are filtered through this really kind of subversive appeal to the imagination at the end of the day. Because if people can be trained to think that certain appeals to the imagination are just inherently logical without any real evidence or scrutiny and ability to replicate and demonstrate the full dimensionality of what they're referring to, then you're going to have an easily shaped consciousness in the general main of society. And the globe is a symbolic representation of that ability by the elite to mold and shape like a golem the human mind.
What's that symbol they have in royalty? The
globus cruciger.
Cruciger,
the globus cruciger, and that there's a literal marriage of so-called science and religion. So the globus cruciger, okay, the
looks like a bottle of Chambord.
Yeah, the messianic dominion over the totality, again, totalitarian appeal of the world and of all of life as we know it. Yeah, Chambord liqueur. It kind of obliquely refers to the globus cruciger.
And hey, Chambord Castle, look at that.
Oh yeah. Oh that when was it? I wonder when was that one built again? Yeah, let's go ahead and look up the Chateau de Chambord. Yeah. Let's look at the... I wonder how many fires this one had. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of those architectural outlays there. How many hundreds of years did it take to build? I wonder.
More than 20, it says.
It's either a flood or a fire. I guarantee you, at some point in its history, they're going to say, "Oh well, it was reconstructed and it was abandoned, and we just reconstructed it." But I mean, when was it supposedly? Yeah, in 17. Let's see, 1500s.
Champort was altered considerably during the 28 years of its construction, during which.
So this was built in the 1500s, guys.
Yeah.
1500s. We can't even build one of those turrets as an exact replica today with the same materials, with hydraulics.
Like Notre Dame, for example, they can't even rebuild
They
it.
can't even fathom costs. So how do they do this with horse and buggy? I mean, architects will, engage in pill pull all day trying to, say, oh, well, we got sophisticated pulleys and levers and, contraptions and shit back then that we just don't use today because we've got hydraulics, even though we can't replicate any of this stuff that we use with less primitive implements. Sure.
Just brain drain, knowledge loss, I guess, just lost in history.
Yeah, it's just too expensive now. Money is just everyone's god, and we just can't even fathom why people would,
Yeah,
waste
it's kind of
so much
weird.
money.
We're not as wealthy as we were back
wait.
then. Interesting.
Huh. How does that work? I thought we could just print money to infinity and it was the same as real money. Oh, I guess not.
Well, I want to take this opportunity to thank you guys for hanging in on today's show, episode 44 of the Zetetic News Cast. We've got about 20 minutes left before the closure of the show. I want to remind everybody to go to Zetetic.news and bookmark it. Visit us, subscribe to our YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, Twitter, and of course I've mentioned a couple times Telegram. And we're also a call-in show. The number is 1-855-877-5112. We are going to be awarding the call-in guest with 444 Tfuel, which I talked about earlier as one of the cryptocurrencies out there, among many, but it's part of the Theta network, which we are trying to build around to get our content beyond the grasp of the censors. We do have a call-in guest, and I want to take that call so we give them time to chat before the end of the show. Awesome. And this is a 978 area code. Thank you for joining the Zetetic News Cast, episode 44. Please share your name and how did you hear about ZNN?
Hi, this is me, Riley.
Nice.
My man.
Yes, again. And what was I going to say? I think, well, there are a few thoughts I sort of wrote down from listening to you guys tonight, but there was something, I think, like, when people, I wouldn't personally consider myself somebody, like, necessarily against technological progress, but the thing that kind of frustrates me when it comes to people, when it comes to, like, blindly accepting new technology, is that, like, I think, the real reason people are worried about robotics and metaverse things is because, like, there's a big difference, particularly, when it comes to people who don't pay much attention to their physical and mental health and their spiritual health. They kind of, they start saying things like, parts of our feelings don't matter, and it's this kind of thing where because of their own problems, they don't seem to understand the values that can be taken away by faking things. And, like you mentioned, it does have kind of a link to like things like trans things because of how like, you can fake things in a virtual world. And some would make the argument, I tend to be also of the belief that we're kind of in a matrix already, so you could make the argument that it is a part of nature for human beings to create a fake matrix, and we're already in a matrix and there's no such thing as an official reality. But even so, I think, just generally on a, for the sake of the pursuit of, freedom and happiness, it is better on an individual level to understand, I think it's always going to be a choice of, how free you choose to be from something like that, whether you're even, whether you're in a metaverse or not.
Mm-hmm. Well, those are great points there. Especially, it's kind of like what came to mind was the misery loves company sort of paradox, where maybe some of the people who were pushing this super simulation kind of paradigm, maybe they themselves are like super introverted and like anxiety ridden and sort of misanthropic in their points of view with relating with people in real life, that they want to create something that people can like relate to their angst and their dread kind of, and creating like a system and a technology that allows people to just like surrender the physical present, whether or not that's really base reality or not. I don't know if we can ever truly know in that sense, but at least it's like, it's a misery loves company effect a little bit. And then you see that phenomena where people out in public, a lot of the times people in public, it's a prearranged ordeal. There's less kind of spontaneous interaction, it seems. There's almost like this overly itinerated or like hyper scheduled purview, and then when they are together, based on after planning and coordinating and communicating, they're respectively kind of on the very device that got them together, but they're both paying kind of more aggregate attention to the device than actually to the purpose for why they're together in the same spot. I've at least seen this many times in public, and it's just kind of like, I mean, maybe it's natural for us to create devices that are extensions of our limbic system, and that we kind of treat in a more and more reflexive manner over time. We've developed all sorts of implements, even something like really primitive technology like clothes. Everyone has just a reflexive need to wear clothes, and there's all kinds of justifications for why we incorporate that technology into our day-to-day lives. So it is a kind of maybe slippery slope dilemma, though, and that's kind of what you're referring to maybe a little bit, is that if you get so used to incorporating technology in your life, become so like hyper dependent on it, then that's kind of like the bed you have to sleep in. That's the bed you have to make, according to that proverb.
It's kind of like I see the technology addiction thing, like, you have the freedom to do that, just like you have the freedom to get the vaccine if you want. And I'll say my piece on it, and I'm not going to make it a big contentious issue with anybody. But at the end of the day, if like you're sitting in a corner, living in World of Warcraft, I'm gonna maybe think that's regressive. Just like if you have the freedom to get spike vax and have a heart attack, I'm gonna think maybe your free will choice was kind of a shitty one.
Yeah, we always do have some kind of choice, but do we have the are we predetermined to have to choose That's the kind of another kind of philosophical dilemma. Like, we have no choice but to choose.
Well, I've heard some very devoutly religious people mention that we should take the vaccine because God gave us the scientists to develop them. And I just see that as problematic, especially when we turn that to the augmented reality VR realm too, because God gave us the scientists to develop that as well. But it begs the question of whether we should adopt.
Go ahead.
The other thing about too is like there were like antivirals and other solutions invented for COVID
True.
that had nothing to do with vaccines, anyways.
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, but it's all about pushing the ritual compliance culture. You know, oh, the experts say this is for your good. You know, we can decide and understand what's better for you than you can. And on a collective level, we're just going to implement what we discern to be the best for the greatest number. And everyone just has to kind of fall in line, or else you're a miscreant. You know, this is the kind of totalitarian appeal of the current scientific paradigm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you bring up about technology, and yeah, it's kind of like this religion of worshiping the possibilities that we imagine technology affording us in the future. You know, you might call it like technologism or something. You know, just like fantasizing about, you know, the future that technology is going to bestow on us. You know, it's like the whole, you know, the bridegroom of Christ is the church, and you know we'll eventually have our grand, you know, wedding night with our Savior. You know, the religious consciousness kind of can bleed into the scientific appeal to totalitarianism.
Oh, I see them as being very much related.
Yeah.
What else is on your mind, Riley? Thanks for calling in.
Oh yeah, I think. Well, you know something else. I think I posted this in the YouTube chat, but I was just last night. I haven't really kept up much at all with what's been going on with Israel. But the thing is, I was listening to Owen Benjamin last night, and he was talking about how he felt there was Jewish propaganda in the show Seinfeld, that it was kind of like glorifying the bad parts of the bad characteristics of Jewish people, like not wanting to do what they're told and things like that. And you know, he was particularly talking about how, you know, they call the soup Nazi in that famous episode the soup Nazi. And when you analyze the episode, like the soup Nazi is not even really doing anything wrong. And and I remember growing up though, my dad is Jewish, and I remember the thing is like some of the characteristics Owen kept mentioning about like acting like a victim all the time, you know, I think those things are definitely, you do see those things in Jewish people, I think, like this self-entitlement attitude, whether that be something genetic or cultural, I don't know, but...
Well, yeah, and then maybe that's another example of the sort of, you know, misery loves company effect of like, well, we need to kind of create a society and a culture in our image so that, you know, there's certain characteristics that will just be kind of accepted and normalized within the society over time, and then that can be glamorized and celebrated, and you know, eventually people will kind of just accept it as like the best way to be and the best way to think, and we all need, you know, certain designations and roles and places in society. We all kind of need to accept our lot, right? You know, and yeah, that is something that is interesting to see throughout the 20th century, I think, especially, but you know, including today, and yeah, just all those different influences over time. It is interesting to note. But yeah, Owen Benjamin he's kind of he's sort of a wild card. I mean, some of the stuff is kind of interesting insights, but he just seems sort of, I don't know, it's like a Johnny come lately sort of thing. And he does it in a sort of entertaining fashion, and it's in a very kind of comedic framing.
I do know. I mean, I think there was something you guys were saying about how even though Owen Benjamin like brands himself these days as like an anti-sphere earther, that he used to like make fun of flat earthers.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he kind of has this kind of drunk frat boy sort of approach to these issues, where, you know, like in college, you know, there's like all these little heated discussions that'll happen at various parties, and, you know, people kind of can say things and represent things in certain ways that definitely aren't like the proper like designation or full picture, but it's like just by the force of the instant, it's kind of brought up, and, you know, all these kind of he kind of likes the heated exchange sort of I don't know, format or something.
This was really materializing, I think, around ZNN's inception back in 2018. He was like banned and started to do more live streams, and for whatever reason, part of his demographic were into the flat earth thing, and they would drop messages in the chat about it. And I guess he was talking about the moon landing a lot at that point, but not like the shape of the earth. And they kept hounding him about it, and then he started responding to it, and was very derisive of it. And they said, well, why don't you have Eric Dubay on to debate? And he went back and forth. He made fun of Eric. He, like Xavier's saying, you know, was very frat boy insulting about it. Ultimately, it culminated in them having some kind of agreement at some point to have him on, but then he, you know, they have each their own story of who's in the wrong, basically, but it didn't happen. But like since then, Owen has come around to all of those ideas, and he hasn't offered an apology to Eric Dubay, but he has had at least as far as I know, I haven't listened to everything, but he has acknowledged that he was confronted with Eric Dubay's content, and he basically became a globe questioner because he wasn't able himself to refute any of the claims made or the problems outlined with the globe model. And he's had a very hard turn. I mean, for a while there, that was like all he was posting about on Twitter. Actually, we had Adam Green on our show, and he was going on Owen Benjamin the very next day.
Right. And they've since had like 3 or 4 additional interchanges where many of the topics we discussed and presaged come up.
Yep.
So it's sort of like we're kind of a gestalt in the background a little bit, you know, sort of the red-haired cousin or
because
something.
You mentioned earlier Adam Green had another conversation with this guy who was making the same arguments about
Jaron. Yeah.
That was Jaron?
Yeah, he was on Jaronism. And many of the same arguments got put forward. But I think, you know, my take was to appeal directly to his line of research, which is the whole, you know, historical context around you know, the rise of these various Abrahamic religious identities, and that many of them are rooted in mystery school theurgy, ritual practices to a great extent, and the identities that are subsumed within those practices end up getting kind of blown up or turn into a larger egregore over time. And that's the same with much of the sciences over time. And you know, I think that a lot of people are beginning to realize it, because both rely on a certain kind of unflinching belief and you know, system of faith rooted around kind of authority and the plausible deniability that the ignorance of the experts is superior than the common sense of the masses, right? And both the religious elite and the scientific elite actually share a similar interest in that kind of attitude amongst people.
Yeah.
But yeah, Owen Benjamin, I mean, at least he's bringing stuff up. You know, at least he's broaching some of these topics and trying to synthesize, you know.
Yeah, he's not afraid to focus on it.
Yeah.
Unlike Alex Jones or some others I could mention.
Right.
That's true, because I feel like with Owen Benjamin, I do, like, whenever I listen to him, whether it be comedy or anything, I feel like he always says something that at least, like, you know, gets me thinking about something. Like, he'll just say, like, he doesn't like Albert Einstein or something that you wouldn't hear usually. You know, he's definitely questioning things more than most people.
Right. Yeah, he kind of he's doing the H.L. Mencken thing of kind of doing the muckraking and then kind of creating gallows humor around it a little bit. And it's like that's good. At least he has, you know, some people listening to new thought forms. Again, I think he deliberately represents it in sort of an offhand, kind of casual, joking manner to, you know, not take himself too seriously.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a comfortable place to be because he doesn't ever need to seriously debate any of these subjects. It's enough for him to, if he's continuing to get a laugh and he doesn't lose his base, you know, it's just plays to his benefit.
Right.
And again, I like, we need some humor with this kind of bent too. You know, like
I agree.
We need comedians to joke about this stuff too, because frankly, when NASA's saying, you know, you can see a tool bag from the Earth with binoculars, I find this hilarious. It's like a Babylon Bee article. And I'm not a stand-up comedian like Owen, so if he can make some material out of this and do some riffs on tool bag, like, I'll be happy.
And what, the 69 bags of poop on them?
Right, yeah.
God, it's like there's so much there. It's like an Austin Powers, like,
space dick. Yeah.
Right.
Spaceship. Well, we're about at the end of the show. I want to thank you, Riley, for calling in. I'll hit you up with the Tfuel. Any parting words as we sign off?
No. There was I think one other small thing is you were talking about Ready Player One, but someone in the Theta community said, like, that there was a logo for some company that shows in the movie that's called GS, or the logo says GSS, and Robert Hartley was saying that might be Google, Samsung, Sony, and he was thinking that could be related to the fact that Google, Samsung, and Sony are, like, partnered with Theta as well.
So you were picking up what I was putting down with respect to all the Theta tie-ins with the advancements in VR and AR and you know, all the streaming pads that they have, and Ready Player One's prognostications about where we're headed, and then Zuckerberg. I hadn't heard that. You know, I did chat with Robert Hartley about having him on. I just haven't done the planning right because he's in Australia and the time zones might present some difficulty, but I would love to have him on and talk about that. I hadn't heard that, nor have I seen that full movie. You know, I kind of saw everything I needed to see in the trailer, to be honest.
Yeah, true. I saw it, like, I think it came out 2018. I mean, I saw it back then.
Wow. Time flies.
Yeah. In the metaverse.
Well, thanks for calling in. Thank you guys for listening. I'm going to put some music on as to play us out. Xavier, any parting words?
Well, I guess between now and the next episode, for big news in the geopolitical arena. I think that there's a pretty large series of events. I mean, again, we can't exactly prognosticate the exact time interval for these things, but I do think that maybe we've got some larger banks around the corner.
I think we're at the end of the fiscal year, and when everybody has to report their earnings, and we see what's happening with the inflation and the actual productive activity. What was already tenuous with all those bank failures that happened earlier this year and papered over with the FDIC and the FRB.
I think that's the tip of the iceberg.
That's the next shoe to drop, in my view. Especially all the news about Ukraine and Israel. It's like this just smells of a overextended empire.
Yeah, it's definitely a Imperium damage control ramp up sort of operation. They're going to try and congeal a new narrative that gets a lot of items checked off down the chart to move some of this Technozoic era paradigm shift type movements down the pike. They definitely want to see more disruption, more unrest, more fear. They want they want a lot of blood in the streets, maybe mostly metaphorically, but perhaps literally, and look for potentially a sort of hot event to creep up that could precipitate all sorts of confusion as conquest type headlines, because that's the propaganda psyop public relations paradigm that we're in is the order out of chaos, confusion as conquest type system, and it's running along quite nicely on a lot of levels. But the big silver lining is they're going to overplay their hand again, and this is just more and more ammunition to add to the stack when it comes to the public having every reason to have no trust in any semblance of power that comes from these institutions that uphold the current crumbling system. So the mass withdrawal of consent, the taxpayer rebellion, and the Great Refusal, these are all things that are going to become necessities by response going forward, because people are going to get tired of the idea that their tax money is going towards all this stuff. And we just have to clamor in ways that aren't catering to more totalitarian appeals. They to watch for the controlled opposition sort of manufactured dialectic effect that could really start to take hold on the world stage of problem, reaction, solution, and the best solution to this problem that was manufactured that garnered public reaction around this particular activity or ritual going forward. I mean, it's really it feels like 2019 again in some ways, but not in the old normal sense of the word, in sort of like, oh, what's the next shoe to drop kind of thing, because we're coming into another election year here, 2024.
Yeah, it does. There's some deja vu going on.
There's some deja vu happening, and then we literally might have the same showdown, the same puppet showdown that we had in 2020 all over again. It's like deja vu. What are they going to pull this time? And as we go into 2024, just keep that on the radar. I mean, if you look at the Mega Singularity episode leading up to everything that we call the new normal, there's quite a bit of presaging and prescient intuition.
It's really the same agendas
It's
being
the same.
carried out.
And it's just the next
We're just
phases.
sitting here watching it unfold.
It's the next phases of them trying to, create the reality world TV paradigm. We're all now characters playing our part in the grand movie and the grand showdown, and the grand Gog and Magog saga. Step right up.
Hey, don't forget to
Which
ask
side
your
are
doctor
you on?
about spike vax.
Oh yeah, you got to spike vax that body too.
That body.
That.
What the fuck?
Yeah, and it's almost like it goes back to the caterpillar.
That's what
you gotta chew out this body. There's so many crazy parallels to that. That one is really. I'm gonna enjoy watching that one again.
Well, if you like the content, share it, subscribe, join our social media channels, Zetetic.news. We'll catch you on the flip side.
Enjoy.